and welcome to Stampscaping 101. I thought I'd try a slimline card with the rainbow holographic paper, along with the nature set I've been playing around with for the past 3 lessons, scenes, etc. And I'm putting together kind of in my head right now a composition that I kind of want to do. Okay, now the rainbow holographic paper I think is really fantastic for skies and whatnot, but I've been playing around with it for different things. I think water is a great thing, and in this kind of bayou type of scene, I really see it being used more in terms of the water area than sky, okay? I don't see, I don't think we would see like, northern or southern lights in the bayou, for example. Not that you can't do that, just for kind of a cool effect, but just in general, I think the water is kind of a little bit more of an appropriate location for this type of imagery. Not that we have to be appropriate at all, with anything that we do in stamping. It's all kind of artist interpretation or whatnot, but let's just give it a try this way for right now, and we'll try to stamp out what's on our, I don't know, whatever you call it, the mind's eye or whatever. Okay, so I am going to do one of the things that I often recommend to people in terms of when they're starting off with scenic stamping. I generally stay with the focal points. The focal point image would be the image that, I think it's the dominant type of image if we use out of the images that we're using, okay? Now, it could be, this cabin's certainly a focal point, that's something to kind of build around. It can also be one of those things where you work large to small. If you're filling up, kind of a space or something like that, if you're putting a bunch of different things into a box, let's say, for example, and you have a bunch of different things, you generally put in the larger things first, and then you work smaller and smaller, because the smaller things are, they're more versatile in terms of the location that you can put them in. So you position those larger things first, okay? Now, that doesn't always apply to scenic stamping. If you have like some deer that you want to stamp in a scene, and that's going to be the focal point, then you're going to stamp that. You're gonna kind of compose your imagery around where that object is going to go. But in this case right here, we have a lot of space in here, so we can do a lot of different things with this, okay? All right, so I positioned my bayou house there, and let's position the cypress trees around it, okay? Now, I have a lot of space in here, and I'm going to do, I would imagine there's going to be 4 or 5 of these at least, okay? Now, these represent trees that are closer to us than that house, okay? I don't know, maybe there's some kind of gigantic, one in certain situations, but for the most part, these would be, closer objects, in terms of this setting right here. So that being said, I stamp this bottom portion of the tree lower than that cap in the background. The lower you stamp something, the closer it is, represents, in Western perspective at least. I think someone said in Eastern perspective, like Asian things, sometimes the location of the object represents different periods of time, I was told, like in block prints or something like that. And I find that kind of interesting, so maybe we'll have to do something like that one of these days. Okay, so a couple cypress trees right next to each other like there. Let's kind of build this whole scene together. Okay, now one of the things I didn't mention was that I am using Brilliance black, graphite black pigment ink, okay? That's going to stamp on this really nicely. You can use a StazOn or something like that too, and that will work and dry very nicely. But don't use something like a regular pigment ink. VersaFine Clair, love it, but on this type of paper, At least with the testing that I did, I could not get it to dry at all. So, I don't know, you can play around with it and, there might be some techniques or some things out there, some kind of drying media that you can put on there, but I just could not get it to dry. Okay, so adding that in, and let's go with the one a little bit higher, I think. Let's go up here, about like so. Okay, so we have a lot of these cypress trees like that. It's pretty good compositional types of things to do to group 3 on this side and 2 on that side. I don't know, they said something about, have you heard this before? Something about kind of things in odd numbers in terms of compositions. It's kind of a little bit more, I don't know, kind of harmonious to the eye, having odd numbers. I don't know if that's the case in every situation, but I don't know. I find it's kind of true for some reason. I'm not necessarily consciously doing that all the time, but I don't know. I think it happens to turn out that way a lot in my scenes. All right, so we have our cypress trees in there. Let's go ahead and fill in. I might be filling in with some additional imagery than this set, some other components that can kind of go along with this imagery, but let's wait to get that. I'm thinking about some different foreground. I've been just using my cypress knees in here, and I might want to go with some other things. All right, now when it comes to this scene is going to get fairly dark, okay, in here and around, okay. I don't want a lot of this. It's what I call kind of taming my imagery, or surface, I should say. The surface of this holographic paper is just undoubtedly very, very loud, okay? And I like to just kind of knock it back a little bit where it's not quite so screamingly loud. And I am just kind of placing these background cypress clusters. I'm not really being careful about it at all, because this whole area up there is going to get fairly dark. So what you're going to get is, these clusters right here are just going to be kind of texture, all right? So that being said, that really takes us off the hook of having to be super careful about, anything that we're doing here, which is contrary to a lot of methodology when it comes to, stamping in general, not scenic stamping, but stamping in general. And that's what, it's kind of funny, the things that make scenic stamping so easy is the thing that by habit makes it kind of harder in concept to a lot of people, because they think it's kind of freeing up, loosening up is the hard part. It's not the technique, because the technique removes a lot of the tedium and precision that other types of stamping require, because you can't overlap things. You don't have colors going into other colors and stamps blending into other stamps and overlapping them, and having to do careful masking and placement, and staying within the lines in terms of coloring, okay? It doesn't take long to break out of that, though. I've run across that, my entire career in terms of the teaching aspect of things. You get people, you start masking with like a paper towel or something like that, and I've had people call their friends from across the room and say, hey, Carol, come here, look at a paper towel. I'm never cutting a Post-it note again. Which you have to do with certain types of images, but tonal images, it removes the need of something like that. Okay, adding these cypress knees down, Knees. Okay, see how these are kind of just filling in that surrounding area like that. Kind of gives it that interesting kind of atmosphere. Look how loud that is right now. It's definitely an interesting surface to stamp on, and I would recommend it for everyone, to try stamping word stamps, whatever. You mentioned that background, where it just says something just says like "Happy Birthday" or something like that, in this background, give it a vignette, a tone around it, or something like that. And I think it would be just a great deal of fun having this type of rainbow. Interactive because people like to move it around when they receive a card like this on this type of surface. Any type of surface that changes with the light really gets people kind of playing around with it and turning it around and, I don't know, just looking at it from different perspectives. It's a really fantastic type of experience, in my opinion. I always kind of imagine some kid receiving my card, and if I have, and I imagine them kind of looking at it and catching their attention, because they're used to playing video games and stuff like that, and, if they just get a static card, it might be, oh, like, cool. But if it's something that's kind of, there's something in there that kind of captures their attention. So I imagine if I think it would be interesting for like a 5 or 6 year old kid, I think it would be fairly interesting for adults. I don't know. That's my kind of theory. I don't know if that's 100% dry, but I believe it would be dry enough. Okay, so you need to kind of counterbend a little bit, or a lot. Alright, now, I don't know if that changes the spirit of this surface right here. I would imagine it probably does to a degree, but it also provides us kind of a nicer surface to work on. I've been applying my additional tones most of the time in my experiments with them wet, and that worked just fine. But I just think it's so much easier to work with your imagery dry. Maybe that being said, maybe the StazOn would be even better. I don't know what the StazOn would look like, if it would be as dark or the same or whatever. Okay, I'm just trying to wiggle this kind of back into shape here. Okay, so let's go with the same pigment ink here, and let's really try to focus this type of rainbow holographic effect into kind of targeted areas. I don't know, it seems different to me, but I'm also working with the Recollections brand of holographic paper here. And it's kind of not as extreme as the chrome coat ones. It's a little bit more mellow. But I think in some ways that could be good for certain scenes, because that chrome coat one is awfully dynamic and loud and whatnot. Okay, now where do we start toning in imagery? Okay, at the base of the trees, there would be shadows, right? Okay, at the base of this cabin right here, but don't tone out that those window reflections that I've kind of drawn into the design. You know, we might even be able to color this with alcohol inks. You know, the one problem about that is I've stamped these in Brilliance ink, and alcohol could put the pigment ink, oil-based pigment inks, back into solution. That's, you know, but I don't know. It could work. I haven't tried it yet, but you know, I wouldn't do it instead of. But who knows? We might be able to get some color into these images. Or what you can try to do too is, let's say we start coloring with a pigment ink, or an alcohol ink over the pigment ink, and let's say it starts to dissolve some of, you know, you can probably use some sealant spray over the whole thing and then color that. So you know, you just kind of play around with your methodology and compatibility, and one thing doesn't necessarily mean something's not going to work. There could be other types of solutions, and again, such as sealants and whatnot. Okay, so I'm adding that color incorrectly right there. I've added a little bit too much. Here's the thing about this pigment ink, so I can just kind of wipe it right off right there. But sometimes where my finger is right there, it kind of gets into the wrong area, and it starts applying the ink in an area that I don't want. So you just kind of move it around, okay? Or you can wipe it off, you know? You can't wipe it off, the imagery after heat setting. It's pretty well stuck, but... Okay, so I'm going to put a perimeter around here, and then I'll start working on the shadows. So it's easy. You know, in terms of one way to work, you just kind of darken the perimeter, and then you start focusing on shadow areas. Well, where do you put the shadows? Well, you put the shadows where there are objects, okay? In wide open areas, there's nothing casting the shadows. So where something is sitting here, you know, I'll do this a little bit later, a little more so, but see at the base of these trees like this? There's a shadow inherently in the design itself, but you reiterate it with some additional tone like that, and see how that kind of starts anchoring that tree more than these ones, right? Okay. So just go perimeter, and then just look for the darker areas on the designs. Follow the designs, and you know, they'll take you to an area of possibilities. Okay. Remember what I said about these trees in the background, how, you know, it just didn't really need to be stamped carefully at all. See, it's because I'm adding in this tone anyway, okay? So it'll blend them all together. There's not going to be as much contrast between the impression and the paper, so they become a little bit more, I guess, incorporated into the background, and they become a little bit more obscured, again, because the contrast, we're cutting down the contrast between those trees in the background, and we're bringing the background darker to the black that they were stamped in. Someone was joking, I was joking with somebody, the cotton balls were used in another video on this other channel in terms of an applicator, and they said, hey, the cotton ball things work, you know, kind of catching on or whatever, and I joked with them that I was joking with someone earlier, you know, like a year ago, that I'll bet someone is going to come out with something like, it's a cotton ball holder, you know what I mean? It's a blending, you know, holder. So instead of holding it with your fingers, you're holding it with this other thing and you're holding that or something like that. Or I joke that someone's going to start packaging these cotton balls in packs of 10 and calling them blending clouds and marketing them to the crafting industry public. And I hope not. It was a total joke, but if I were to see something like that, I wouldn't be completely surprised. And then there'll be this saying that these aren't your normal cotton balls. These are kind of like, specialty ones or something like that. They're a much finer weave or something like that. I don't know. I hope we don't see something like that. All right, so kind of get that tone up there. Now I'm going into my trees here. Sometimes I apply a little bit too much, so I kind of wipe like that, and it kind of spreads it around a little bit better. Okay. Now, at this point in time, this does not look good to me. Okay. Everything's kind of sloppy. That's it's not done yet. Okay. So this is where, kind of in the processes, certain types of processes, um, when you're bringing something into focus, okay, imagine it's like a lens or something like that, that where you're slowly bringing a scene into focus. And it's not really scenic stamping, it's just kind of methodology. Um, Everyone's kind of used to just being able to kind of foresee things as they go along. And that was, if you're working with like a coloring book or something like that, where you're just kind of filling in one color after another, it's easy to kind of tell, but kind of imagine a coloring book where you're just kind of all colors are being applied at the same time, and it's just slowly getting into focus, all colors at the same time. I don't know, that might be a bad analogy, but it's something a little bit more akin to what you're doing here. Okay, you're bringing the scene together as opposed to individual cells within a scene, or within a just a card. Not it doesn't like I said, it doesn't have to be a scene. That's a little bit more kind of in the spirit of what you're doing with something like this. So that being said, the I don't know, first coloring process on the card is not going to be indicative of the end result after, you know, 5 more layers of something, or several more applications of different media or whatever. It would be like someone kind of getting distressed because they're painting their car and they've just applied the primer, and they're saying, "Oh my God, it doesn't look like that cherry red." It's, oh my gosh, this is, I'm panicking because it doesn't look like that cherry red, clear coated 4 layers of paint, sparkle car. All they see is the whatever, the white or black primer. Okay, and that's what this is right now. This is just your kind of base coat right now. All right. That being said, I'm going in here, and while it's not going into a different medium, this is being used for different things. It's being used for kind of some framing on the outside perimeter, but now I'm using it for shadows, okay? So now the black's being used for shadows. Okay. It could be used for just coloring in general too, okay? Let's get some kind of streaks down in this water right here, okay? Alright, just kind of atmospheric streaks. It doesn't represent necessarily a shadow. Okay, see this is how I'm kind of adding it down here at the base of this cabin. I'm putting some of it on the cabin, too. Okay, something like that. And see when I bring some of this tone around the base of my cypress trees, what it does is it kind of incorporates them all together. It's like they're sharing a surface that they're submerged in. When they're just stamped right on top of the paper, it's like everything's kind of floating. But now, by doing something like this, you're anchoring them down into the common plane. It's all on the same plane. They're all kind of within the same surface. So what you're doing is you're bringing them continuity. In terms of surface, yes, but it's also in terms of lighting too. So you're bringing them together in so many different ways. Now you might notice how I'm kind of blobbing, but then I'm also just kind of spreading it around. You can do kind of the really bad technique like that. But with these types of foils and this type of ink, it really gives you a lot of time to manipulate, to correct, to move things around, to refine. It's just a really fun medium to work with. These inks are, now the Brilliance inks are oil-based, but there's a drying, some kind of drying solvent in it. It's not necessarily this, but I tend to think of it as somewhat of the stays-on of the pigment ink world. I don't know if it's a solvent pigment ink. I don't know if that's what it is. It could be, though. Just like a stays-on is a solvent ink, or those kind of watercolor types of pads. Kind of more of a permanent style of ink. All right, so kind of bringing it together. I can probably move a little bit faster. My black pad here is getting a little bit dry. It does take a little bit of time to do this. I think it's totally worth it, though, and it's easy to do because I'm not even having to switch up to different colors or whatever, but it's a slow kind of buildup of ink because it is that foil surface. So the thing that makes it easy to manipulate and to correct and to move things around or practically just wipe off, if you wanted to, if you wasn't looking right in a whole big area, the thing that allows you to kind of wipe it off also is the thing that kind of slows down the process of applying it because it just doesn't stick to it. Like I can go on, this type of paper and that's stuck there, okay? But applying it on this, it's like applying it on glass. It happens a little bit more slowly, especially when you try to build it up, okay? Okay. Shadows right here. Kind of blending it down. Sometimes when you wipe, you're not applying the ink, but you're removing it. It just depends on how much ink is built up there. Okay, now one of the things that occurred to me when I was doing my scene yesterday, has it already been a day since I did that marker one? It feels like a week, whenever you're stamping. If you don't stamp for like a couple days, sometimes it feels like a week. And yesterday feels like several days, I don't know. But it occurred to me, I think I should have went darker right underneath the canopy of trees and right in here. And kind of given it a darker kind of spirit, I don't necessarily see it as spooky. I see it as rich and deep, I love seeing photographs of like sunset in the marsh, in the bayou and the swamp. The swamp is just teeming with life, too. It's like creating tons of oxygen for all of us you know, for all living creatures and whatnot, you know. Tons of biodiversity. Yeah, you can, you know, we can stamp a, you know, a creature of the Black Lagoon in there, but I don't know. I don't see it as something, you know, terrifying. I wouldn't want to go in there, you know, and you know, without you know, certain precaution. You know, could be poisonous snakes, could be invasive, you know, pythons or something like that from people, you know, getting rid of their pet, you know, their pet snake that they bought when it was, you know, 4 feet long. Now it's, you know, 10 feet long. But, by and large, I think it's something really quite spectacular, and I want to go and visit it someday. I'll go to the Clyde Butcher Swamp Walk. You know, he's a photographer of, like the, I don't know, what is he called? The Ansel Adams of the Everglades or whatever. But getting there. Okay, see that right in there? Yeah, it's a little bit too dark. I don't know. It needs to be kind of blended out a touch, maybe. Applying this like this on a big card, it's you know, pretty extensive in terms of this process right here. It's fun though. It's, you know, I don't know if it's meditative, you know, when I'm doing a scene like this, or a video scene, and kind of explaining what I'm doing. But I don't know. It's almost like the zen of I don't know, kind of media application. The thing that I'm doing here is I'm trying to model light. Okay, so it's a fun process in terms of just kind of watching things kind of coming into focus in terms of yeah, the look that you're going after, or some sort of, it might not even be, I think it's better to think of maybe not the look that we're going after, but maybe more the feel that we're going after too, or both. You know, you're achieving the feel by how it looks, I guess. So it's kind of both visual and kinesthetic. But think about kind of more of the atmosphere too, as well as the visuals. You know, they'll go hand in hand. Okay, I'm going to change and oscillate the top portion of this. I'll make certain areas a little bit darker. They don't have to be equal in terms of, you know, smoothly applied. I need to use those post-it notes on the back here. Someone taught me how to put a post-it note here so you can grab the post-it note and move these things around. Oh, here's a post-it note right here. Let me see. Is that sticky enough? So I can move it around like this. Thank you for whoever mentioned that to me. I need to keep a pack of post-it notes, though. Okay. It starts to look a little bit too blobby like that, so I'm going to take, let's use this as a tool, okay? And I'll remove ink like this, okay? See that right there? Someone said, "Oh, I'm sure, you know, it's all about practice, okay?" And maybe in general, you know, doing certain types of techniques, but this is the first time I've ever done a subtractive mark using this. It's more about technique, you know, in terms of learning something. If you apply the correct technique or good technique on the, you know, the first time you do something, there's no reason why you can't get it in the first try. Like on something like this, I always mention that my scene is not looking like what I want it to in the end result. In fact, when I first started applying ink on this, it looked really ugly. You know, there's no question about it, okay? But it's when you kind of start building things up, and if you can kind of give yourself permission to allow things to develop, you know, it'll come around. Even at some very experienced stampers, you know, they might kind of give up on something if they're not getting it. Something doesn't feel right, and I always encourage them to um, not toss it, but you know, if they need to, step away from it and go back to it. But develop those things, and oftentimes those ones that someone didn't really, or you know, they almost gave up on it, or something like that, or they periodically gave, you know, temporarily gave up on something. Those oftentimes, to me, when they do finish them up, are the best looking pieces that I've seen from them. It's because something happens. They allow them something to happen. They develop certain types of technique. And there's a certain type of almost enlightenment in the object itself because they saw a piece to its final kind of resolution. Okay. Now this, to me, using this cotton ball or swab like this and going in here, this is really giving me a nice tool. It's a subtractive tool instead of an additive one that I haven't done before, but I think that, you know, these different types of textures down here really contributed to the overall piece. But now, the thing is, see, here's the thing. I did that, and I added, then I subtracted, but then I'm going to go back into it and do some more additive process. You see what I mean? It doesn't have to be kind of a linear process where you do one thing, technique, medium, or whatever, and after you do it, there's a point of no return, okay? You can just keep doing it. You can layer things now. See, like in those scratches down there, where I've removed some of that ink. Now, some of that might be a little bit harsh, so what you do is you soften it up a little bit like this. And then maybe you do another subtractive mark in there. You see what I mean? So you keep it circular like that. It's like life, right? You just kind of stick with it. There's persistence, you know, and you know, what do they say? You know, you can be quick but never hurry. It's always kind of best to not hurry the process. When you hurry it, it's a lot more precarious, and then I feel that you don't get the results a lot of times that we're ideally going after, that would come with a little bit more patience. And the patience, to me, always takes less time, because if you get something that you don't want from a hurried process, we kind of have to repair it, or people end up doing, like I said, they start over again. So we've lost all that time when just kind of taking a little bit more time to do it in the first place, you know, would have been exponentially less time spent overall. Okay, so adding this in, I'm now looking, this post-it note's kind of weak. It's been sitting on top of my desk. It's not sticking here. Yeah, here. And maybe I'm not sticking it to the right spot. I don't know, or maybe the back of this paper just doesn't allow it, you know, to stick very well. Okay, I could heat set this right now. It just depends if I, you know, have things where I want. Remember, don't heat set if you kind of want to manipulate, like, the, you know, the streaks in here a little bit, you know, further. Okay, I'm going into here. I'm doing it kind of sloppy because now I know I can just kind of refine it with this. My new, the cotton balls are like blending clouds. The Q-tip right here will be the, let's see, what should we call it in terms of a product? The ink sculpting wands. How's that? I don't know, I shouldn't joke about that too much, but I don't know. I don't like it when, like, common items, are kind of repackaged and sold to people. For a lot more expensive, prices. Okay, adding in. I don't know if that's picking up on the sound here. If it is, apologies. My son's playing this game called Minecraft. And these days, with stay-at-home types of things where kids aren't going out there, he's playing kind of over a what is it, Google Hangouts or something like that. Audio chat room. And he's normally pretty quiet, so he's kind of like super exuberant and whatever, I don't know. Just like a stamping, gotta let him express. Alright, so adding this in, I'm kind of getting there now, you know what I mean? This is where it's starting to come together for me. In terms of the look, I'm kind of, as I'm doing it, I'm kind of developing, you know, technique a little bit with the Q-tip and blending in, so on and so forth. It's kind of interesting. This whole thing becomes this kind of wet, malleable, kind of oily ink surface. Okay, but let's take a look at this. See that right there? Definitely, it's good for me to look in the camera monitor because it tells me areas that I could kind of refine my toning in here, specifically getting areas, blocking off some areas a little bit more, to maybe focus some of that, you know, rainbow holographic light in a different area, or subdue it in a certain area. Okay, like back there was a little bit too much. Now that's too little. Let's see. Let me grab some of this. Let me remove some ink up there. Okay, and I'll get it more on the top maybe. Okay. Over here it's a little bit loud. Get a little bit of tone back in here. Alright, I need to use my post-it note down here. I'm getting too many fingerprints in my card. If there was a crime here, that's, no doubt people would be able to get a lot of my fingerprints off of this card. Okay. Is that too much light right in here, maybe? Subdue it a little bit. I like to get a lot of ink in the four corners to really frame a scene off quite a bit. Okay, now that is, I think, where I want to go with this. This is a piece. Everything I'm saying about kind of the freedom of application and allowing things to develop too. Plus, it occurs to me that when things are a little bit more sloppily applied like this too, it might apply to different scenes as well, but it kind of adds to the overall kind of, I don't know, feel maybe, when it's a little bit, there's fingerprints everywhere. This is like a murky kind of surface right here. It's murky and kind of varied. I don't know, like I said, it kind of lends itself to the overall spirit of the piece. Now look at this. I mean, this is like really fun stuff to be able to kind of go back in and remove some ink. I'm not trying to remove it. I'm trying to put a streak back into kind of a, too blocky of a application of ink like that. So it's one of those things. I didn't like this blocky kind of application of thick paint. It was kind of a sloppily applied application of it. But that type of thing is allowing me the ability to go back in and add in these kind of little finer types of little details like that. So if you don't have that ink in there, okay, now watch this in the tree, see that? I'm able to kind of remove and kind of highlight just by, removing off a little bit of that paint. So what you do is you take and, you potentially take kind of a weakness, a big thick application of unevenly applied ink that's still wet on there too, that could be seen as a weakness, but you turn it into a strength by being able to do certain types of applications that you wouldn't be afforded with, certain other types of media. All right, so you see all these little streaky things in here. I've kind of gone in here. Watch this. See that part of the trunk? If I want to kind of remove some of that, you just kind of wipe it off like that. And doesn't that look a little bit more three-dimensional that way now? Okay, let's look at this one right here. Okay, see that right there? Take this. See that? Look at that. Okay. I've removed a little bit. Now see, here's the reflection of it down here. Let's put a little bit of reflection in the water. See that? Isn't that cool? Here's a reflection here. Here's a reflection down here. Maybe here's some other ones down here. Put it reflecting in the water. See, I'm just coming up with this right now. It's not, I haven't done this before, so it's not like, oh, okay, you really practiced. It takes a long time to practice to do. And don't put it down to talent either. It's all about technique. Okay, here's a little bit of reflection down here off that one. Okay, the technique is just taking things and doing it slowly like that. Here's this one right here in the water. Okay, that. Hey, that's fun stuff. I've just kind of discovered another thing that I like to do potentially on this. All right. It's fun stuff. I like playing around in the details like that. Okay, let's heat set this. apply some other media on here. Let's go with the Brilliance Moonlight White. Okay, same type of thing. In terms of our application style, nice and slow. All right, my blending clouds. All right. One of the things that might help with something like this is kind of throwing it into a butterfly clip and kind of clamping it down like in the back there, making it nice and tight, just like there, and then you kind of hold on to the, the butterfly clamp. All right, so where do we apply some of this? I'm going to apply it at the base of some of my objects, like these trees or something like this, to give it a little bit more of a kind of a frosted, misty type of feel, hopefully. Now this pad is really super dry, okay, so I don't know how much ink is going to be applied with any given tapping. Okay, I got quite a bit on here actually, so be careful about your application. Kind of take it nice and slowly, just dab it in and let it build up accordingly, or incrementally. I'm going to put some around my house here. I'm going to put my house in the mist. Kind of a little low-lying fog on the water's surface. Okay. All right. Kind of gives it a different atmosphere, doesn't it? I can knock back the objects that are a little bit farther away. I can illuminate sides of trees if I want to. And again, it's not some big blob of paint. I just put a little bit in at a time. It's like, think about it like you want to get your consistency as if you're applying like a thin powder on something. Yeah, and just kind of, if you're getting kind of blobs, then blot it off and then just use it, maybe at a different angle, a softer touch. Don't pound on it, okay? It's like you're just touching the cotton to the surface and then coming back up, okay? Imagine someone's powdering their face or something like that. You're not kind of, hitting it or something like that. Kind of some of those background trees, putting in them in a little bit of a misty haze, like that. Things don't have to be evenly applied. You can have a little bit more mist here and over here, or something like that. So don't think about it too much like nature either. You can, but think about it more like, if you watch like any TV series or anything like that, a movie where they're kind of walking out in like a forest. It doesn't matter what time of day it is or whatever. They often have the like the fog machines kind of running in the background with a little bit of a fan on it. So you see this kind of kind of mystical type of movement in the background in the form of fog or mist. I see it all the time now. You know, now that I do this in scenes, you see it all the time. You know, being used all the time. The fog machine, and it just gives things kind of a nice atmosphere and kind of a visual movement. You know that to makes those scenes just kind of less, kind of static. Or the background's less. Or more dynamic, I should say. Okay, so anyways, see that right in there? We have that. You really see where I've applied the mist, Michael, like that. You can really tell. But then it really looks like that. See that? And I'm able to apply this right over the top of all this black because it's heat set, so it's just not really interfering at all with anything I'm doing. Let's heat set that one now a little bit. It definitely heat sets darker than what it looks like when it's freshly applied and wet. Okay, now my windows in there, they are just the color of the paper, okay? But what I like to do is I like to illuminate my interiors with some white paint in the form of a white paint pen. Okay. Now, it might not look this, different from your angle, but I think when we kind of tilt this around a little bit and see, it will indeed be kind of different looking from the lightness of the paper. I'll put some of this on the post here too, just for a little bit of lightness. Okay, so see that right there? See, I mean, it's not reflective. This area here is very light and reflective, but it just looks different in terms of the adding that in there like so. Okay, you can add in some highlights in your water if you want to. They call this specular light. It's light that's brighter than white. So it's like a little sparkle, a reflective type of thing, reflecting back at you, like here and here, which is different than white, which is this, on any bottle. Just a little lighting, reflective bits of light, okay? Now this area in here really screams for kind of some variation, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add in my little fireflies. If you have a kind of a green pen, maybe that would be more appropriate. I'll make some of these a little bit larger than others. These are my little fireflies flying around. Some in the background too. All right. But that doesn't really make them look too firefly-ish, right? Lightning bug-ish. So we'll take our cotton ball. Or cotton swab. And let's take some white pigment ink, fray and loosen my tip here. If you want a soft application of something, do it with a soft applicator, okay? So cotton ball's soft, but it's tightly bound, so I'm loosening it up here, like so, okay? And you're going to just dab in. Let's let's go into some of these, especially the foreground. The foreground lights. All right, now we have some illuminated little fireflies in there. Look at that. Can't really see it. This is what's fun about this paper. This looks a lot different than this, right? It's like illumination, but this is overall scenic lighting, but then you get illumination when you go like that. Okay, now what I was talking about earlier was I might add in some other types of imagery in here. You know, maybe some reeds or something like that would be good. But I wanted to use my overhanging leaves stamp in here into my scenes. So let's do some of that here. Okay. Now, if you're going to stamp something over the tops of this, you could do things both ways. You could stamp it into kind of wet ink, but sometimes when you do that, when you lift off, you'll be removing ink at times, which can look good because you can get some black and reverse impressions in certain areas. But if you just want it to be just straight applied, then kind of heat set everything. I don't know, I might still get a little bit of lifting if some of the inks are still a little, you know, touch on the moist side, but for the most part it's pretty dry. Okay. I'm just going to add some of this. I forget. I'm going to add in some of my Spanish moss hanging tree limb too. Okay. So I have some of that coming in from the perimeters. Okay, let's go down about like right around here. Okay, coming in from the outside like that. It kind of points to the inside of the interior of the scene. And let's do the opposite side as well. I usually like these hanging in a little bit farther percentage-wise into the scene, but this is such a super long scene, so this is 11 inches, so quite a bit. Okay, we'll come in here like so. On this side, we'll do one on this side. So it's two over here, one over here. That makes three, right, for that shape. It's left and right, but similar shape. Okay. All right, so let's add in some additional foliage. This with the leaves. And again, this is another one of those reasons why I wasn't worried about, you know, that little cypress cluster in the background. I just figured it wouldn't show anyway, you know. Too much, you know. Get it back there and it adds to the depth, but see this kind of overhanging tree limb here. It's just layering the imagery on top of one another. And just a really densely packed ecosystem. A lot of biodiversity and life. Okay. That. tack and peel that I have on my blocks here. All right. I'll add some foreground reeds down here. I'll just add another layer of depth to the cypress knees. Alright. You can also use the leaves down below as like a bush, but I just want to go for a little bit of a different texture here. Alright, let's take a look at this and see if there's any additional things we might want to use in here. Oh! I used this yesterday with this bird. I think it looked really good in there. Sitting in the water. Kind of providing, additional focal point or kind of visual landing spot too. The bird is kind of a visual lead-in too, though. You know, it's something looking into something, so it kind of welcomes us into the scene. I'll just kind of put him right down in here. Kind of adds to the stillness of something too. Okay, something like that. It seems like there's a lot of stuff in here. You think frogs, and I'm talking about, kind of emotionally or whatever, the sound of frogs, not visually. All right, I have that bird in there. I'm going to kind of put another layer of something right behind it, like it's, who knows, maybe there's a nest right in here for it. Or maybe it's just doing some fishing or whatnot. Those cranes are, is it egrets? Man, they are amazing. Fishers and ratters, and it seems like they catch everything. I've seen videos on YouTube of this thing going around and catching like 5 gophers within a couple minutes. It's like it's just a sport for those birds. They ate one of them and then just kind of kill the other ones. Maybe they're, I don't know, maybe they're putting them in storage somewhere. Saving them for a rainy day, but I don't think so. Alright, let's take a look here. There's a lot of visual dialogue going on in here. Look at those, aren't those fun, the fireflies, lightning bugs, and let me change my exposure here a little bit. Okay, I changed the exposure of my camera. When the scene gets, done and fairly dark, I need to change the exposure of the camera. There it is. See my lights within the space there? Look how that changes. Look at this. How much more they stand out, when I don't have so much light reflecting off of the surface. I like that purple back there. There's the green. Look at that kind of green. It's changes colors like that. Yellow, orange, right back in here. There's my bird. But do you see that kind of white pigment ink in there? You can really see where I've applied it when I go like that. Like that, it's barely visible. I don't know, so this is, it's one of those things that it's really fun to play around with, and I'd really recommend getting a pack. It's 25 full-size sheets, 8.5 by 11.4. I think full price it's about $6, but if you have a half-off coupon or whatever that's always out there, I bought my packs for buy one, get the second one at 50% off. That's any foils. Or I don't know if it was any of the Recollections pack over at Michael's, but it was quite a few of them. But, you know, something like this, it's just a super dynamic surface to play around with. And I don't know, you can use it for, I don't know, just a lot of different types of applications. I don't know if you can probably put it through a Cricut or something like that too, and just, you know, have your words in this rainbow type of thing. You know, happy birthday would be incredible with that. All right, so anyways, hope you enjoyed it. If you enjoyed these videos, please hit the like button, and if you feel so inclined to get notifications whenever I post a video, you can subscribe. It always helps out the channel for this very niche-oriented style of stamping in the form of scenic stamping. And as always, thanks for tuning in to the channel and watching the videos. See you on the next scene.